Do you think that trust between you and the student and trust between you and the staff is important?
Yes, because the teacher has to trust you that you are giving the appropriate information and that you're not sliding them the answers in what you're portraying or what you're conveying.
And I think that children have to trust you that
Yes.
you're not going to give away their secrets, right?
Yes.
If they're talking to their friends and you're interpreting, or from one class to another,
Yes.
they need to trust you that you're not going to give that information out. And we're required, right, by certification, at least sign language interpreters. Foreign language interpreters are just required by the Code of Ethics. But
well, in education, it's a fine line because you're still part of the education team. So you still have to, as any educator, you are almost in an education role as an education interpreter. So you have to walk that fine line of, okay, they're talking about doing something really not cool. Where does this fall? And
agreed, yes.
And so you have to find that space where you're covering yourself, but you're also protecting your student. So
because we're mandated reporters, right?
We're mandated reporters, and we also have to protect not only our student, but now we are, because we're part of the education team, we are involved with the entire class, and we're involved with the staff as well. So you have to find that balance of, okay, they're talking about cheating. I know that they're going to cheat. What do I do? Right. And that's where for the education interpreter, it gets very, very hazy and hard, because technically we do have to kind of let the teacher know, or at least let the teacher of the deaf or their primary contact within the school. Who does that student report to? You have to let them know.
Well, because we're the only ones who know what they're saying and
exactly
say it.
And it's not our position to reprimand or discipline. I hate using those words, but within the education, it's not our place to discipline or redirect. Well, we can redirect. Right. I redirect.
Yeah.
But
and when you're talking about the responsibility of the interpreter, where does that end? Like, I've been in the education setting a lot, and they almost want me to act as an aide or almost to educate the child. And we're not there to educate. We're there to interpret, convey information. What do you do when someone wants you to, let's say, educate the child, take them in another room and go over this worksheet?
That is really hard, because depending on the interpreter and their knowledge, it's really easy to fall into the
educator role.
The educator role. I mean, I'm guilty of sitting down with a student and reviewing. When they say, "Oh, can you review this information?" I'm like, I can review vocabulary. And I sit down and I review, okay, this is the English word, this is the sign word. And I'm assuming.
I think that's very much within our wheelhouse.
As for reviewing paperwork, I explain, do you have a student? I use other students. I'm notorious for using another student. It's like, is there another student that you trust for reviewing this information that we can go into another room? And then I'm still in my interpreter role because I'm interpreting for student to student.
Right.
And I'm still doing that process of exchanging information, but then the load is not on me. And that makes it so it's still within my realm. The teacher is like okay, kind of still knows my role. And
it helps develop a peer relationship.
And then there's that peer relationship, which for a lot of our kids, that's really hard to have a connection with other students because they don't understand the language barriers that they're dealing with.
Right.
How do you handle a parent coming to the interpreter, to the educational interpreter? Directly.
Well, it depends on what they're coming to the interpreter for. If they want to know how the student is doing academically, that interpreter should refer them back to the teacher because we are not the instructor. We are not the person who gives out that kind of information. We're just the interpreter. If the parent is coming to the interpreter to say, my child never has homework, what's going on? Don't they ever get homework? Again, redirect that back to the instructor. That's the instructor's job to talk about classroom participation and processes and production. If they're coming to the interpreter to say, we had a death in the family, they may not be, fully wanting to participate, or they may feel emotional today. I just want you to know that this is going on in our family life. I would thank them for telling me as the interpreter so that I could have more patience with the child that day, or maybe make sure to re-explain things that day when I see that they're kind of like, blank-faced. But then I would also say, thank you for the information, but please can you share that with the teacher as well? You always want to make sure that whatever is shared with you is shared with the instructor. Now, if the parent is coming at you to yell at you saying that, you're not doing your job, my child isn't doing well in their classroom, things like that. Again, I would refer them back to the instructor and say, I hate to say this, but I am just the interpreter. Whatever your student does is really on them. Let's go talk to the teacher. And I would walk them to the teacher because I don't want them to think that I'm just trying to bow out of an uncomfortable situation. I want them to know that I really feel like it's the student's problem, not my problem. So I will walk them to the instructor and say, we have a situation. And then, let them go at it.
Good answer. Because that would be my answer too. It's like, get to the teacher.